Good evening. Welcome to the very first Café Europa online, organised by Hampshire European Movement. If you'd like to hear about future events, please sign up at our website, hands4eu.org. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the Erasmus Programme and the UK's present and future involvement with it. We have a panel of 4 people who work with the Erasmus Programme, some of whom are graduates from it. After the panel has spoken, we'll take questions from the audience. First up, we have Gemma Barnes from the University of Southampton. Gemma.
There we go. Hi, so my name's Gemma Barnes. I'm the Study Abroad and Exchange Coordinator at the University of Southampton. And part of my role is within that I am the Institutional Coordinator for Erasmus funding at the university. So my job is to oversee all incoming and outgoing exchange, obviously from Europe for the Erasmus Plus programme, but also for our international exchange programmes. I also look after our short-term mobility for students, so during their summer. And within that, we look after everything from the very practical side of things to the more marketing and employability side of things. So today what I'm going to talk about is what Erasmus means for us as a university, why student mobility is so important for our graduates and for our students who are studying, the role Erasmus Plus plays as part of the student mobility piece at universities, what students think about Erasmus Plus, and also looking forwards a little bit. So the most recent up-to-date information we have about what's going on with the Erasmus Plus programme and looking towards the future as much as we possibly can with the continued uncertainty around Brexit. So hopefully this will work. So I think the first thing to talk about for me is that Erasmus Plus is known to different people for different things. There's lots of different funding streams. It supports lots of different activities. But there are some misconceptions with Erasmus Plus. So it's 30 years old. Within those 30 years, it's helped nearly 9 million people across multiple different sectors. The largest one being higher education, where it's helped nearly 4.5 million students across the EU to have a mobility experience or a traineeship experience of some kind. One of the common misconceptions, though, is that Erasmus Plus is for mobility only within the European Union. The funding actually covers all EU member states, European free trade and European economic areas, but there is also international areas of Erasmus Plus funding. These are known as partner countries and exist within one of the multiple different key actions that you can apply for within Erasmus funding. So it's not just about the EU, it also has a much wider stretch for our students. One of the really exciting things about the Erasmus Plus programme is that the member countries continue to grow, and lots of different countries have joined the programme at different stages. Now, this point in particular could become particularly important when we're looking forwards towards the UK's continued involvement in the programme. I'll explain a little bit about that at the end, but it really goes to show that Erasmus Plus, even though it's a very well-known and established programme now, it continues to grow every single year, with 2014 seeing even more countries becoming involved in the funding stream. Another common misconception is that Erasmus Plus in terms of higher education is only for student mobility. There is actually funds for both students and staff in higher education to undertake mobility. That's for both teaching and training, and it's for both academic staff and professional services staff or admin staff. Like myself, I have been lucky enough to do 2 of these mobilities, where I went out and I met my counterparts in Iceland and in Norway a couple of years ago. So it really does have a much wider stretch than just the students. It's a very beneficial thing for higher education sector in general. So I'm not going to bore you too much or explain too much about this slide. This is really just to showcase to you the breadth of the Erasmus Plus programme. So it's split into different key actions, and within each key action there is a different funding stream that people are able to apply for different reasons, whether it's mobility or whether it's partnerships. So the one funding stream I will focus on is Key Action 103, which is for higher education for student and staff mobility. And this is the key action that I am responsible for managing at the University of Southampton. So For me, one of the most important things to talk about is why is student mobility so important to our graduates and to our students who are studying with us. And it's really, really easy to talk about the very well researched part of this, so the employability benefits. So students who go abroad, whether it's with Erasmus or whether it's just on international exchange, are much more unlikely to be unemployed after they graduate. They have a higher earning ability, and also they tend to perform ultimately academically better in the long run. But one of the things for me as to why student mobility is important, and this is something that Southampton as a university is particularly passionate about, is that it really helps those from disadvantaged backgrounds, or what is classified in higher education as widening participation. So I will just refer to that as WP. So WP students really benefit from student mobility. A lot of people, when they go on exchange, it's often the first time that they have either travelled on their own, or for some of them it's the first time they've travelled at all. And for any of you who have travelled on your own, you will know what a beneficial experience that is. So Erasmus is particularly important for these students because it is a lifeline in terms of funding and financing, and I will talk about that a bit later. So 38% of students who did undertake this and were classified as WP students said that they wouldn't have been able to do that without Erasmus funding. So I think that really highlights the importance of this to that student group. And 90% of students, so the whole student body, all report a massive improvement in their soft skills, which is very, very important for the graduate job market. It cannot be taught in a classroom, and it's often the soft skills that are overlooked by graduates who are looking at getting a new job, and it's something that the graduate job market is really, really demanding. One of the big words that's used in the sector is global graduates. I prefer global citizen personally, because I think that in current climate is a very, very important concept to think about. And you can see from the stats there that 7 out of 10 companies being asked saying that foreign language skills or international experience is key to people they are looking to recruit. The Erasmus Plus programme is really important as an opportunity for these students when they are looking towards their future. So what role does Erasmus Plus play in student mobility? So I've already mentioned that there is also international mobility, and there's also short-term mobility for graduates. So why is the Erasmus Plus programme so important to the higher education sector in the UK? So 50 to 60% on average of the UK undergraduate mobility is funded and facilitated through the Erasmus Plus programme, and that is mirrored by us at the University of Southampton. So consecutively, in the last kind of 5 years, it has accounted for 60% of all of our student mobility at Southampton University. There is a huge amount of support from the higher education sector in terms of 9 out of 10 of them saying that Erasmus is essential to them or very important to them. And I have to say, even though some of the mechanisms of Erasmus Plus to manage student mobility can be very frustrating, they are very, very useful, and they do help with student support and student participation in Erasmus Plus. It's also a little bit of give and take. Whilst we obviously, our outgoing students get a huge benefit from going abroad, having students that come here from Europe through the Erasmus Plus programme is hugely enriching as a university campus. There is a financial argument for it for the UK. I'm not going to focus on that too much because whilst it's an important argument, I don't think it's the most important argument. For us, it's about helping our students who potentially can't travel as part of their degree or don't want to travel. They still get to meet and greet people from different backgrounds and have a very intercultural experience when they're on campus, and that is hugely valuable to those that maybe can't travel as part of their degree or can't afford to do so. This becomes really interesting to look at in terms of if Erasmus Plus currently accounts for 60% of all UK outbound mobility, potentially what is the impact on the overall higher education sector's strategy towards improving outbound mobility? So there was something launched called the Go International campaign, Go International Stand Out campaign, where the UK pledged to double outbound mobility by 2020. COVID-19 might have something to say about that at this point, but the target is still very much there, which goes to show that Erasmus Plus is going to be crucial to us in reaching that target because it's such a support mechanism for outbound student mobility. So if we look at other countries and the percentage of students that are mobile for them, you can see that Germany is doing really, really well. They've gone to double their outbound mobility too, but that's a very ambitious target. If we compare that now to the current UK percentage of students that go abroad, it's already a lot lower than a lot of other countries. So if we were to lose the Erasmus Plus programme, you can kind of understand the impact potentially that will have in us standing any chance of increasing uptake of student mobility in the higher education sector. One of the other important things to think about is actually what students think about Erasmus Plus. We can say lots of impressive stats about employability benefits and intercultural benefits and soft skill development, but ultimately it's the students that go on these experiences that are really, really valuable feedback for us. And I think the first stat is very impressive. I'm not going to read them all out, but I know from a personal perspective, I have students come up to me every single year and say, thank you so much for helping me go abroad, you know, and thank you so much for helping me write my CV afterwards, etc., etc. It was my experience abroad and being able to talk about it that got me my first job, or, you know, got me my PhD placement. And that is ultimately why people like me do our jobs. But it's also a really exciting thing for the Erasmus Plus programme, because it really shows that this has crucial impacts for individuals on an individual basis. The other point that I will pick out of this is the second one from the bottom. In current media storm and current climate, I think that's a really, really important point, is that a lot of participants, so half of them, report that by going abroad and doing an Erasmus Plus placement, it actually makes them stand stronger against every single form of discrimination possible. And again, that goes back and links back to the idea of creating a next generation of global citizens and people who are tolerant and understanding of what culture you are from and are able to appreciate that having that interculturalness is very, very valuable as a society. So just a nice picture to kind of summarise some of that in terms of what people say and what our students think about Erasmus Plus. Again, I think the stats speak for themselves in terms of what Erasmus Plus can do for the next generation of young students coming up. And on a slightly lighter note, Annette, who is watching, will know this. There is an inbound joke in our sector that there are a lot of Erasmus babies that exist. And a nice little fact that we often use is that 1 in 5 Erasmus participants in higher education who are in an international relationship actually met during their Erasmus Plus placement. So I think whilst it's a light-hearted joke, I think that shows socially this really does bring people from different backgrounds together. So for staff mobility, it's, again, the facts kind of speak for themselves. And that 9 out of 10 Erasmus staff that go on one of these placements report the same improvements that students do. So this goes to show that it's not just limited to students finding this global citizen within themselves. This also reflects the staff and how they feel and how they communicate interculturally to people from different backgrounds. So looking forwards and looking to the future, it is looking bright, but it is still a little bit murky around what exactly is going to happen. The UK government has stated its desire to remain in the Erasmus Plus programme. I'm going to pick out in that statement the little bit that's a little bit suspicious, that says in elements of the Erasmus Plus. And I know that Universities UK and the British Council are really pushing for more clarity and a much clearer commitment to the programme. Universities UK, in conjunction with the British Council, have launched the hashtag support study abroad, hashtag Save Erasmus social media campaign, which I know several universities across the UK are heavily involved in terms of stating that as a sector, we are very supportive of Erasmus Plus remaining. Much more recently, and this is what landed in my inbox today, is that last week it was debated in the House of Lords. There have been rumours swirling about a UK national replacement scheme. I'm not holding my breath too much. However, the latest statement is very promising. This was what was asked in the House of Lords, and it was answered by the Baroness, and this was her answer to this question. I'm not going to read it out. I'm happy for you to read it. But the main things to pick out are that they are working closely with the devolved administrations as we develop an alternative scheme. So they are looking at, in the case that we are no longer able to participate in the Erasmus Plus programme, a UK replacement scheme for that funding mechanism. What that looks like, when that will arrive, whether it will actually happen, still remains a big question mark, but we are hopeful that this is at least a positive sign that the government does really see the value, like we do, of the Erasmus Plus programme. Just some other quotes from different people in terms of the support for the Erasmus Plus programme, and how it is very positively viewed in terms of the current government. Again, we don't know what that's actually going to mean. And I've also provided here just some further reading, so I'm happy to share the slides through William somehow. If you are interested in finding more about the UK strategy in higher education and also the impact the Erasmus Plus has on our students, then there's some really good documents that Universities UK and the European Commission have produced that you can have a read through. And that is the end of my presentation.
That's great. So if I could ask Natalie to come up next, so I can see if she's all set, and spotlight is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a little bit of background in my job and what Erasmus means to me. So I'm an MFL teacher at the Henry Beaufort School in Winchester. I cover Spanish with a little bit of French. But my involvement in Erasmus started before this, when I spent a year abroad living in Spain, in Alicante, as part of my Spanish degree. So that really links to what Gemma was saying. That was my experience of Erasmus. So when the opportunity came to be involved in school Erasmus, that's known as Erasmus Plus, as the role of an international links coordinator, I jumped at that really because I experienced such, or took such a lot from the experience when I lived in Spain. So I've done the role of International Links Coordinator for about 7 years, and much of that role is taken up with implementation of our Erasmus Plus projects. So that's what I'm really going to share with you this evening. Why the Erasmus Plus project is so good for our school is that we found, mainly due to the popularity of mobile phones in many cases, the traditional exchange model has all but phased out. Teachers and parents and students quite rightly feel that they need to be in school. Students need to be in school as much as possible. And students seem less and less able to cope with going away and staying with a family who speak another language. I'm working currently in 11 to 16 schools, so some of the students are quite young. This, coupled with equal opportunity and what we refer to as closing the gap for pupils of a lower socio-economic background, has meant that any funded project with real evidenced educational purposes is really highly sought after. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can have a look at some slides, not just listen to my presentation. Okay, so this is just a few slides that I'm going to be talking over. Our tagline as a school that we use at the moment is pride, happiness and ambition. So I've sought to link that in with our project. We are ambitious in our language learning and desire to travel. We are proud to represent our school on trips abroad, and we're happy when we can experience new culture and make new friends. The website at the bottom there is the international links section of the Henry Beaufort website. What we found in having a project such as this, that it's not a primarily MFL based initiative. That's quite important. So even students who don't particularly enjoy their MFL lessons, don't have an aptitude for learning a language, can still get involved in this funded project, working on from an educational point of view. It suits our school very much because it provides any student with an interest in travelling abroad and experiencing new culture the opportunity to do so. So if you visit this website, you'll be able to click on the different tabs which show you all the different projects that we've done over the last few years. So what we found also with a project like this is that students get to, in inverted commas, meet their partner before they travel abroad to stay with them. So it's a little bit of a comfort blanket to the younger students, that they can have a chat online with that partner, find out a bit about them, and they feel a lot more confident when they arrive abroad. So over the last few years, since I've been the International Links Coordinator, we've covered themes such as healthy bodies and healthy minds, building bridges. We went from the metaphorical bridge to the bridge of friendship, to the bridge of communication. We also looked at new media, new methods. This had elements of internet safety and also using technology in the classroom. So the Erasmus Plus project is not just for students, the staff that are involved get to share good practice. We've learned a lot from our partner schools over the years. So how did it all come about? eTwinning is the platform on which we formed our initial links. So you can use this platform to find and message teachers from across the world, set up small classroom-based mini projects, to multi-country, multi-mobility projects that span 2 to 3 years. We were originally approached by our German and Italian partners many years ago to form what was then known as a Comenius project. And we've been working with them ever since. So the process of the application can be a little bit tricky. It does require a strong theme to run throughout the 2 to 3 years. Commitment from a lead teacher in each school, which in the current climate can be a little bit tricky because we have obviously lots of demands on our time. And then a strong coordinating country is really good. We submit our applications at the moment through our partner school in Germany. They've got a good track record with achieving funding for our projects. So once it's agreed for UK schools, the funding is provided by the British Council. They oversee and support the projects and request the interim and final reports. Again, that's the job of the lead teacher to get those ready. They monitor the expenditure. Obviously, the grant is agreed at the beginning, and we have a certain amount that we need to spend at each stage of the project. And then outcomes need to be shared. So we use something called the mobility tool where we can record all of our expenditure. They provide lots of webinar support as well via the British Council. We have been told at this time to carry on regardless of Brexit, just to keep applying for another project. But really it's a little bit up in the air about what will happen. Our current project, which you can see here, was 2018 to current academic year. We chose the title of At Work in Europe. You can see through the description here that it was trying to prepare our students better for the world of work, skills and competencies needed in the world of work. We also looked at team dynamics, strengths, weaknesses, aptitudes. And we could share what is best practice in the schools that we're partnered with. So here you can see at the bottom, our partner schools that we currently work with are based in Finland and Italy and in Germany. And we've worked with them for several years. Our prospective new project is called There's No Place Like School. That will hopefully run to 2020, but obviously current pandemic is causing a bit of havoc with that. Our current project is on hold and our future project may well be delayed. But again, it's got a very important subject matter. You can see it's not language based and it's got a lot of elements to it. So in terms of getting a project passed and receiving the funding, you must really have clear justification of why you want to carry out your project, have some tangible outcomes for your school, and share how you intend to disseminate to a wider audience. In each school, it's really important that each school plays their part. So projects are divided into phases, each with a different theme linked to the project title, and there's usually a mobility, a trip to one of the schools within that particular theme. Last time we hosted was in October 2019. You can see the theme there that we picked out was educational pathways and team dynamics. Just going through this slide, you can see the different things that we focused on when we had all the children visiting the Henry Beaufort. They did a trip to an outdoor activity centre. They looked at their team dynamics, where was their best place within a team, looking at their personality traits. We took a fascinating look at the British industry, car industry, by going to Oxford Mini Production Plant and explored pathway options at a Winchester University tour. So this is basically what a mobility would look like if you're one of the children taking part. So making your project visible can be quite tricky. Obviously, we're all in different countries. So already I've mentioned we have our place on the Henry Beaufort website, international links. I'll always promote this kind of project at open evenings, and taster days is something that lots of the primary schools which is really nice. But it's vital that you have a successful twin space, which you can see on this slide. The twin space enables all of the pupils to have a profile. It's a little bit like a Facebook, but it is a secure online environment for them that's got password protected. They are members and they can chat to each other. We post everything in the materials to show what we've been doing in our schools related to the project. And that ongoing work is essentially what makes the project viable. It's not all about the meetings that you go to in the countries, the mobilities. It's what you're doing in between as well as a school. So each school, this is my last slide, just to show really what is up around my school for the pupils to see if they're interested in something like this. They're interested in going abroad. It's obviously fully funded, which is good. They can come, but they are also weekly doing quizzes, games, questionnaires, trying different languages. We've done some successful video conferencing with our partner schools, which has been nice, to design and choose the logo for each project. And that really kind of brings it to life for them to see other classrooms with pupils in other schools, all working on the same thing. So that really brings to a close my presentation. We're hopeful that our involvement in a project such as this can continue, even though coming out of Europe, we await government and local authority decisions really on when we can travel again and whether we get our new project passed. But it really enriches my role in school to be both MFL teacher and international links coordinator. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Natalie. That's fascinating to hear those sort of real life examples for an even younger generation. And again, so much emphasis from both speakers on overcoming differences and integration and bringing people together. So if I could ask Tony to come up next, and he'll talk about his work with Erasmus for Entrepreneurs.
That's correct. Hi, everybody. I will as well share a few slides. Very limited number of slides. Just to have a background to my talk. Just to tell you a tiny bit about me first, as you might hear, I've got a French accent. Hopefully it's not too disturbing. If it is, then put it on the chat and I will try to speak with a proper English accent, if I may. Other than that, I've been running European projects for the last 20 years, and probably the best one I've ever dealt with is the one that I've been running now for the last 7 years. It's really an interesting one, full of good stories, and I will share with you a few in a moment. On a side note, I also took part in an Erasmus student exchange many years ago. I was in Scotland, and as the previous speaker, Gemma, was saying, it does improve you a lot. And I really, if you know anybody hesitating or thinking of going abroad and not being sure about doing it, well, they should definitely do it. It opens your mind to a different way of thinking. From a French education system, coming to a British one was a culture shock. But I enjoyed it so much that I came back to the UK later on to work, and now I'm running a couple of companies and enjoying it very much. I will see for how long more, but for the time being, it's quite okay. The idea of Erasmus for young entrepreneurs is really to match people that have been running a business for many, many years with people that are starting or thinking of starting to run a business. So we match them and we make the pairings so that they learn from each other. Well, the experienced entrepreneurs will get new ideas from the green shoots that the startups are. Often the startups are younger people, but it's not necessarily. I've seen people starting businesses in their 50s or even 60s. I've sent people abroad because it's a program where we send people to different countries in Europe. And there's no real age limit on taking part in the program, as long as you're willing or thinking to start a business. And you can always bring something interesting and new to the host that will be the experienced person, the experienced business person. Sorry about that. It's really the perfect West timing for the phone to ring. Apologies. My mom likes to call me when I'm online, so I'm sorry about that. So the idea is to have the host gain skills, a different view on how they could create new products or learn about different markets. The host will be in a different country from the person coming to them. And the host, for example, might be in the UK. An experienced business person in the UK will welcome somebody from Italy for a number of months. And they will learn, they will develop contacts with the Italian person and the Italian market as a consequence. And likewise, the new entrepreneur, the startup person, will gain skills, will gain a lot of confidence and a lot of knowledge on how to take their first steps into developing a business. And as a bonus, the startup person will also get some money from the program, because we want to help as much as possible people to start businesses. And one of the big things, they will get a lot of knowledge, but it shouldn't be to the detriment or of not being able to do it because they don't have enough funds. When you start a business, it's usually quite costly already or quite time intensive, and you have loads of things to juggle. So if you have to consider going abroad, spending your own money to learn, it was considered a bit too much. So the program does give some financial support to the people going abroad. It varies between one country to another. People coming to the UK, for example, will get €1,000 per month to a maximum of 6 months. So a startup coming from abroad to the UK will get a maximum of €6,000 to stay and learn how to start and develop their business, as well as develop loads of local contacts and help the local experienced business person in growing their business as well. So there's a lot of win-wins in this situation. That's the map of the coverage of the program at the moment. So as you can see, it's the EU 27, but beyond that, we've got as far as Armenia on the far right of your screen. Further down, you even have Israel, which is a country that is a partner in the program. We've got Turkey, of course, and Ukraine, part of the program, which are not part of the EU, but it's a great program, and as long as the governments want to chip in and participate in the funding of the operations, then they are welcome to do so. And we hope the UK will see it as a benefit in the future. At the moment, the program is running until 2022. Beyond that, like many things, we don't know what will happen. But there are good echoes that it's a fairly cheap program to run, so they will want to take part, as well as it supports one of the key ideas, entrepreneurship development, that the UK quite like as an idea. But yeah, you can go to Israel, Singapore, and the USA as well, outside of the EU. So it's growing as well in terms of the number of countries. There are talks of opening South America and possibly Africa in the future. So mainly between European countries, but not only. And some examples of exchanges that took place in the last few years. You can see that you might recognize a landmark of Winchester on one of the pictures. That's the cathedral, because if you remember, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there were some renovation. Well, there's always conservation work on the cathedral. And a few years ago, it was conservation of the bosses on the top of the ceiling of the cathedral. And there was a company based in Exeter, but working in Winchester for quite a long time to do this job, who hosted one Italian conservation person, and they exchanged. The Italian person brought expertise on how to digitize the bosses of the cathedral, how to document the process of conservation of these bosses, and the more traditional company that was doing the job, the company from Exeter, was sharing their knowledge as well on how they were carrying the work and how they were winning contracts such as this one. So that's been something that took place, I think it was 3 years ago now. But the companies, the two individuals, the owner of the business from Exeter, as well as the new entrepreneur from Italy, are still in touch and continued in working with future projects related to conservation in different big buildings such as this one. The others are also entrepreneurs that went or came to the UK, that went from the UK or came to the UK. The first one was a designer a graphic designer from Spain, who came to a fashion designer in London. So the fashion designer was making dresses, exactly these ones that you can see the pictures of on screen, and she was not super savvy computer-wise. She had loads of ideas, but she needed somebody to help her put these ideas into a graphic form that can be then printed on textile. So that's a great sharing experience. Again, the Spanish person had this graphic design computer knowledge, and they designed a new line of dresses. These dresses, the purple one, is exactly what they've worked on together on designing. And the middle one, it's a farmer, actually, a farmer business based in Italy that welcomed somebody from the UK, all about learning how to grow olives and make oil from these olives. And this Alivu is a brand that you can find now in some places in the UK, mainly in the southwest of England, because that's where the new entrepreneur from the UK is based, in Wiltshire. But you can find it around there. And she imports, as well as since then has got some olive trees of her own in Italy. So she's importing the olive oil from Italy, from Sicily, as well as having her own. And finally, if it turns, two other, that was very much local. It was students, because very often it's the case, it's business students that have ideas. They want to start a business, but they just finished their education and they are not too sure where to go with it. finding a job is not really that motivating for them. They have this business idea and they want to take it by the horns. So some of them take part in the program to test their ideas and learn also from experienced business people on how it's possible to develop their own business. So I've got a student that went to Spain related to marketing, and there's another one which I'm still in touch with and I see very often. Is based in Southampton, who does vegan products. And this brand, Earthling, was launched just before lockdown, a few weeks before lockdown. And these are vegan products imported from India, but to the recipe that the person in Southampton has decided upon. And he branded the products and he's retailing it in some shops around here. From what I know, Southampton so far and Brighton, but as I was telling him the last time I was going to do this presentation, he said that he was going to look into Winchester, but unfortunately lockdown happened. But I got a little sample here, which is very tasty. It's chickpeas, basically, roasted chickpeas, but with an Indian flavor. Very nice stuff. But from the time he took part in the exchange to today, it was a couple of years for this brand, this product to happen. So it's not instant, an instant business development, but there are people that are motivated usually then take part in this program, and some of them do achieve what they want to do. So if you want to learn a bit more about the program, that's the website of it, erasmus-entrepreneurs.eu. There's loads of success stories, loads of videos and whatnot. It's a great program for seeing life happening in reality. In fact, people that learn from each other and grow with each other. It's really I very rarely hear a bad story coming out of this program. There is the odd one. Some entrepreneurs don't get on with each other, but like in life, not everybody likes each other. But greatly, it works very well. And that's about it for me. I'll leave it there. I didn't want to say too much or talk too long. Hopefully it was okay.
That's great, Tony. Thank you very much. And again, some more fascinating examples of exchanges and demonstrating that enterprise can be part of our shared culture as well. That there's a lot to be gained by sharing ideas on different ways of doing things, different ways they're done in different countries, and we're all enriched by those exchanges. Yeah. So if I can finally ask Susie to give us her contribution. Susie.
Thank you, William. Thank you. I won't talk too long, and I haven't been that organised in preparing a PowerPoint presentation. So I've just got a few points I want to share with you, and then if there's something in particular you're interested in, maybe we can bring it up in the Q&A afterwards. So my name's Susie Nicodemi. I live in Winchester. I work at the British Council, which is the national agency, together with Icarus, of the Erasmus Plus programme. I used to work in part of it at the British Council for about 15 years. So I have quite a lot of connection and knowledge and understanding of how the programme works as a whole system on a European level, and how it works connected to the European Commission and policy making, and also quite a lot about the kind of quality standards and all the kind of support and training networks around it. So if any of you are interested in any of that, I'm happy to tell more later about it. What I'm here to tell you about today, though, I'll just share a few, if I can do this one. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see the web page of the National Agency for Erasmus Plus in the UK. Yeah. So this is where you can see all the different things, as the others have already kind of explained, Gemma and Natalie as well, and with this other interesting thing about entrepreneurs, which I never knew about. Erasmus Plus isn't just about student exchanges in universities. It's definitely a major part of it and a big target audience. But 7 years ago, what happened was that there was a big compilation of quite a few European programs under the same heading. That's why they took the Erasmus as the most famous and the biggest brand and the most well-known to keep that name, but they definitely added a plus. So I'm here to talk a little bit about one of those pluses, which is the youth work sector, the non-formal education sector. You can see over here that there's a list of all the different things you can do under Erasmus Plus. And there are some things here which are very much related to non-formal education. It's about civil society, it's about activists, community projects, that kind of thing. And when
Susie,
I say,
can I just ask one question with these websites? Could you just copy the URLs into the chat as you go past each one, please? And people
yeah, no problem. Do you want me to do it as I go through? Oh, hold on a minute. I've got to do something clever with to access the chat while I'm on the thingy.
Doesn't matter if it's easier to do it later. Then
I'll do it afterwards for you. Yeah, because otherwise I have to come out and in, and it gets a bit complicated. But they're all here, so they're all still here. So I'll post it afterwards. Yeah. Youth work and non-formal education, just to like clarify it, these are things, this is an educational approach that the UK has a very strong background in, by the way, education which is outside of school, outside of formal curricula. It still has a structure, it still has a learning objective, but very often it's about experiential learning through doing. And international activities and projects like the ones we've been talking about have a hell of a lot of learning through doing in them. And there's a lot of opportunities to get grant funding and to have networks and contacts and all sorts of development opportunities through Erasmus Plus to make that happen. Okay, so this is the national agency page, which if you or your organisations that you're connected to, or your schools or your university, whoever, people that your neighbours, whatever, this is a very good first start to kind of work out what you're interested in and find out some basic information. So the youth sector, without giving too many of my political leanings away, although we're probably most of us quite an anti-Brexit approach, I guess, but in the last 10-12 years in the UK, the austerity approach of particular political parties has meant that the youth sector in the UK has been pretty much decimated, and there's been a hell of a lot of youth clubs closed and resources and connections with social. Anyway, we won't go on any of that. But what we do have is a few different funding streams and the Erasmus Plus, which is really helpful in this way. So, for example, in 2020, in this year, there is nearly 12 million worth of money available for grants for organisations to support young people to do projects and activities. And that's just Erasmus Plus. There's loads of other programmes as well that are there to help support the youth sector. And over the 7 years of the programme, well, the last 6 years actually, £74 million worth going towards youth organisations in the UK. And it's helping young people to develop personally and professionally. It's helping them to develop societal competencies. It's very much encouraged for NEET young people, so those that are not in education or employment or training. It's a wonderful opportunity to get young people out of their housing estate, out of their difficult situation that they're in, change their perspective, give them a new activity, help them make new friends, help them discover and develop skills that they weren't aware of beforehand. I really believe in the Erasmus Plus. I've seen it with thousands and thousands of young people that has really changed their lives around. And I know that the others have also mentioned all the positive stories. So I'll just share a couple of them with you, just a couple of the stories here, just so you can see some examples of the type of activities that have happened. So these are UK projects that happened in the UK but these kind of projects happened all over Europe with different young people from different countries. Okay, so the first one I'd share with you is this this Stargazy project, which it's still going on. It's been going on for about 10 years. It started with this guy here in a blue t-shirt, Leo, who's a mate of mine actually. He's from Austria. And he's a youth worker who works with young people that are in very difficult situations. So usually quite strong mental health difficulties, or a risk of suicide, or that kind of thing. And he made a connection with this village in Cornwall. And there's a guy here, this is Malcolm. And he's a traditional fisherman from Cornwall who goes fishing and come back and go to the pub and doesn't talk a lot. So Leo and Malcolm, they made friends and they set up this project. And what they do is they host young people who go for 1 month, usually for the first time in their lives. They travel abroad and they live in this little tiny Cornish fishing village for 1 month. They have to learn to live on their own, to cook, to live with people who from other countries. They have to learn how to go to a British pub and a British supermarket and all those kind of things. So that's all the life skill development things, which are priceless, especially for young people in really difficult situations. And at the same time, the project themselves, what they're doing is Malcolm teaches them how to make fishing boats in the traditional way. And it takes about 3 weeks-ish to make a fishing boat. So they're doing a lot of the teamwork skills and manual labor and developing a little bit their English language and working as a team, all those kind of things. And in the end, they create something physical. And then on the last week, they go out in their fishing boat, they carry it down to the sea, and they go and they fish. They carry it through the little village and they fish, and they catch their own dinner, and they go home and they cook it, and they invite the local community to come and share a meal with them. And for many young people, this is life-changing. And for the little tiny village in Cornwall, there were several people who live in this village who had never even traveled to London. And over the last 10 years, they've had all these different young people from different countries come and live in their tiny village and blossom under the care of this English cultural, historical as well, keeping alive historical traditions. So that's one example. And then another one I would share with you is this project at Leeds Festival. I'll explain in a minute why it's got a different banner at the top. I'll explain about that in a minute. So this is an organisation called Everything is Possible. They work with homeless and unemployed young people in Leeds, and lots of other young people as well, but this project is particularly for that. And what they do is they go after Leeds Festival. It's a sustainability environmental project, which is getting really important right now, connecting lots of young people in lots of countries with a passion to do something. And they invite young people from all over Europe to help tidy up after the festival, and to take all the things which are left behind, discarded, that can be reused, recycled, and they take them to homeless shelters. And so all those people that go to a festival and buy the one tent that they only use for a few nights, that is then taken and used for really positive things afterwards. I'll come back to this banner thing in a minute. I'll just tell you a little bit about the benefits of these projects. So there is a European research project called RAY, and it's been going for, I can't remember, quite a long time, 10, 15 years, something like that. And every year they have online questionnaires, and they find out about people's development and why the projects are useful. And it's really helpful to show the impact, to show the learning, to kind of prove why these projects are good for people. So this is just a little bit of information about it. So it shows you how people's personal capacity, their own personal development about dealing with new situations or relating to people that are different than them, and developing their own self-confidence. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You can see it in the numbers. This bit down here is actually about, it's kind of the focus on NEETs. So it's, are the people that have been involved in these kind of things going to get back into education, employment, training? And you can see from these kind of answers that, basically they are. After their experience, they're inspired, they're developed, they've gained all sorts of knowledge, attitude, skills, and it's really obviously positive. I'd also mention the key competencies. So a lot of youth work is based around competence development, and there's all sorts of resources. If anyone's interested in that, I've got all sorts of resources about supporting knowledge, skills and attitudes for community work and for youth workers and for those that train them and all that kind of stuff. And you can see on here, I was just thinking that Gemma was talking about soft skills in the student exchange and the international connections, and it's the same program, and it has a very obviously a very similar approach for within the youth work sector. I would focus quite a lot on this kind of area, because the young people that are involved in these projects, they yeah, I mean, maybe they've never traveled before, or maybe kind of cooperating in a team for them is like a big challenge. And a lot of people realize that they've really developed that through these projects that they do. So in the type of activities that are funded, so in Erasmus Plus, there are youth exchanges funded, where you have groups of young people that go and visit each other and work on something together, and they can host them back again later in their place. And there's also support for youth workers and for building policy, supporting all sorts of policy links. The UK has been really strong in that, actually, especially in youth policy. There's been a lot of European sharing with countries where youth work and non-formal education wasn't recognised, and this country's had a very strong history of it, and we've really supported and helped quite a lot of countries develop, for example, their youth worker training, or for it to become accredited at universities and things like that. So we should be very proud of our legacy, and we should be continuing it. And yeah, the focus on citizenship, this is like a really big thing right now, and the others have also mentioned it. The idea of political engagement, the idea of working with diversity, the community impact, or supporting being an active citizen in your local area, and working with diversity. These are really strong within the programme as well. 3 years ago, I just want to explain about this thing which I said about the Solidarity Corps. 3-4 years ago, or you might remember that there was a certain referendum in 2016, and also there were the Paris and the Danish terrorist attacks, etc. So in 2016, there was a famous speech by Juncker, his State of the Union speech, where he said that there should be more European solidarity. So what happened is they kind of rocked the ship a bit of Erasmus Plus, and they took some money from Erasmus Plus and some money from other places, and they created some extra funding, and then they took a big part of Erasmus Plus, which is the volunteering thing. So this bit I was talking about, this boat project, for example, so there's hundreds and hundreds of organizations across the UK, and in there's all sorts of people all over the place that do this, and they took it out of Erasmus Plus, and they kind of used that to be the cornerstone of this European Solidarity Corps, which also funds local solidarity projects. So if anyone, I did promise I wasn't going to talk much about it, so if anyone's interested in funding for local community activism, especially with this kind of corona lockdown, it's I mean, there's money there. I'm happy to give advice and information about that to people. The last thing I was going to tell you about was, here I go, very last thing. There are a whole lot of resources, information, training courses, everything, etc., for all sorts of community activism stuff. So it doesn't have to only be about young people and being a youth worker at the youth club. We're very lucky because most of them are in English, because English is the international language. So there's all sorts of things to do about reaching out to young people. A lot of this is also transferable into the formal education, into the classroom, or into kind of after school club things. So this is just an example, because the focus very much in these international programs is about reaching out to the disadvantaged, about leveling the field, and encouraging competence development and working together in an international environment, no matter your educational background or how much money you've got. And the Erasmus Plus program gives that to students, to teachers, to educational professionals, and to young people in housing estates who have never travelled before. So I really believe in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susie, for again another set of quite complementary stories and examples and resources that sort of add to all the others, and some wonderful stories. I loved the bit about the fisherman who was teaching all these youngsters how to build a traditional fishing boat, and for them to have the confidence in what they were doing to go to sea in it at the end. So that was a lovely story, and great input from all the speakers on the. A lot of you will have heard about this from your email from the Hampshire European Movement, but if anybody here isn't on that mailing list and would like to be, if you go to handsforeu.org, you can sign up on the mailing list there. You don't hear from us unless there's something happening or something we'd like to get involved with. If you'd like to support the group, donations via PayPal to hantsem@gmail.com are always very welcome. I'll put some of these details into the chat afterwards. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well, where any of the events that we're running get shown. So in terms of what's coming up next, our next event is on Wednesday the 15th of July, and it's a talk on settled status by Patrick Young, who's with a new charity called Settled, which is a spin-off from 3 Million Rising, and it's aimed at supporting EU citizens who want to continue to live in the UK after the time limit on them comes, and helping them through some of the difficulties that they face in terms of making that application. So that's the 15th of July. I've been having trouble keeping quiet about all afternoon and not telling anybody about until now is that our October meeting, we have a talk from Professor Michael Dugan, who many of you may have seen on television or on various different social media clips. He's the Professor of EU Law at Liverpool University, who has been a very outspoken critic of government handling of the whole business of Brexit and trying to ride roughshod over the law. I haven't confirmed with him what the actual topic of the talk will be, but if any of you've heard Michael speak before, he is a fantastic speaker, and I'm really chuffed that we've managed to get him on board for that one. So that was really all I wanted to say in that bit. Okay, well, please put your questions into the Zoom chat, and I'd like to invite the panelists, if I think you've all got your videos on now anyway, and you might have things you want to ask each other. I mean, the one question I saw in the chat was from Susie to one of the others, so you might want to start with that one yourselves, and as any other further questions get added to the chat, we can pick them up from there. Susie?
Thank you. Yeah, so my question was, how much are local community or families involved in the things that you do, in the student connection or the project at school, or even with the entrepreneur thing? I guess it would also, is there anything that is encouraged or structured in your projects that makes it wider than the people that are just taking part?
Was that for Gemma?
Do you want me to start? So from a kind of higher education student perspective, it's probably less the direct students with families, but something that comes with the Erasmus Plus in higher education is something called the ESN, which is the Erasmus Student Network, and there are different branches that exist in each country that is involved in the scheme. And at Southampton, we're actually lucky enough to be the host to one of these branches, and it is run by students that have previously been on exchange for students that are then going on exchange, and they recently have started, they have like their own projects in their own right, and one of the projects we've been helping them with is called Erasmus in the Community, and it's a project which gives funding through the Erasmus Plus programme for students who are currently on exchange or have been on exchange to go into local schools and talk about the importance of cultural differences, to speak a little bit about the country and where they're from, which for some very young students is kind of their first exposure to different languages or how different people live or different cultures that exist, and to start getting young children and kids in school excited about visiting different countries and kind of appreciating different cultures and different languages. So that's one part of how it works in higher education. That's a very formal part because that's part of Erasmus Plus within HE. On an informal note, I know a lot of our academics at the university often end up hosting incoming exchange students as kind of they have them come and live with their families, they have host families, often because some students come for a short period of time. If anyone's tried to rent a house for a short period of time in Southampton in particular, they will find it's nearly impossible. So academics often open their doors, and it really helps to make these students part of our families. And I know from a personal perspective, having to deal with the COVID-19 outbreak and the fact that we had students abroad at the time, quite a lot of our students who decided to stay abroad have actually been taken in by students and their families because halls of accommodation have been closed. So it really is a kind of, in a less formal way, it really does put these students smack bang into the middle of these communities and these families in some instances.
Yeah, business-wise, well, business is a lot about networking and meeting other people. So the incoming entrepreneurs usually really go anywhere and everywhere they can. And yeah, in Southampton, they also do some events with me. But it's mainly engaging with the networks that their hosts have. So having the host as the person that is living here and knowing people, they get immersed totally in the local business environment. Maybe not so much with the wider community, but definitely with the business environment, they get loads of contacts and build a great network wherever they are going to.
In terms of school, for the club that I run every week, any student at all can join that club. We do use host families, obviously, when we host a mobility. They do tend to be perhaps slightly more well-off families that are willing to open up their homes, that perhaps have a spare bedroom. But when it comes to mobility going abroad, I always open up several spaces to any child, a pupil premium child, someone of a lower socioeconomic background, perhaps who doesn't have a passport. We can purchase that passport for them and make sure they get that opportunity to go abroad. It is important for it to be visible to local community. So transition days, we tend to do like a taster session of Erasmus for year 5 or year 6. And I have in previous projects, when we did internet safety, I ran a workshop for younger children to come up and do that with us. I had some international ambassadors, so students that came every single week to the club ran those workshops for me. So the kids do get a lot from it.
Can I just come back? Oh, sorry, William's speaking, but the microphone's off. William, I'm trying to facilitate, I guess, but the microphone's off.
Sorry, oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah, thanks for that. So Milan had a question for Natalie, asking, do you have any online contacts with partner schools, especially now during COVID, with students and teachers, etc.?
We still have our twin space running, and it's going to be really important. I don't know what the British Council will say in terms of whether our project can be completed. we had a trip due to go in May to Germany, which was cancelled. So the students are still maintaining their contact online via their twin space. That's with our partner school in Germany, our partner school in Finland, and our partner in Italy. But if I wanted to at any point start up a new project, perhaps just an online project, then I would go to the eTwinning page that I had in my PowerPoint, and there's just lots of teachers on there who put ideas forward and specific age groups or specific ideas that they want to work with you. So that's a really good networking space.
Thank you. And Alexander has asked, how would the UK's future status as an associated country or a third country with regard to the EU affect its access to the Erasmus programmes? Gemma, do you want to, or anyone else take that one?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? I think that's why I made the point at the beginning that there are members that aren't necessarily strict EU members that are involved in Erasmus. So countries like Norway and Iceland, who are either in the EEA or the EIC, I think that's what it's called, the acronym for it, are allowed partner status. There are partner countries that are affiliated to the Erasmus Plus programme. However, those partner affiliations have been negotiated with the European Union. So how flexible the EU will be with us and how those negotiations go for us will ultimately depend on the outcome of the ultimate Brexit negotiations, the much wider piece. So it's still very, very much an unknown. It's not impossible that we can be in it without technically being a full member of the EU, but obviously it relies on what the EU and what type of partner country they would consider us to be. So for those that are like in part of the EEA, they are allowed to be a member, but there are restrictions to what funding streams and how much funding and to what involvement they can be in terms of whether they can do the applications or whether they are reliant on full partner countries to do the applications on their behalf. So there's a lot of complications, there's a lot of unknowns, and at this point, until we know what we'll be viewed as a partner country, it's very uncertain in terms of what kind of involvement we'll be able to have in the future.
Thank you, Gemma. Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
I would add in, okay, I'm not in any way an expert about the history and politics of Turkey, so please don't go in any details of this, but Turkey have been a programme country of Erasmus Plus for some years now, and despite some people a few years ago saying that that they were all going to come over here and that they were going to take over the EU, and their membership of the EU seems to be very far away if you look at the things which they're supposed to achieve and the directions that they're going in for the last couple of years. So I think Gemma's absolutely right. We have no idea what our status would be as a country. My best hope would be that we would be like Turkey, that we would be a programme country, but not an EU member state.
Anyone else, anything to add to that?
No, not sure. But if we look at the partner countries we have in the program, their requirement is that they sign an agreement with the European Commission and that they put money in the pot in order for their nationals to be able to get funding. If they don't, they could still be able to take part, but then their nationals will not get any funding. So that's yeah, it's not magical. If the UK puts some few hundred thousands or a few millions in the pot, I think the UK participants will be able to be funded in anything. But from what I heard, it will be very selective in what the UK gets involved with. So what they will get involved with or what the UK will get involved with, we don't really know. I'm not sure the UK government knows yet. So.
And just an interesting point to add, well, I don't know if you will have noticed, but Switzerland are firmly not in the current Erasmus Plus programme. They were ceremoniously kicked out a while ago. And actually there is an active petition for from the Swiss government for them to be let back into this new Erasmus Plus programme, and whether that's going to be allowed or not, I think might potentially be an indicator as to how flexible they're going to be in terms of what partnerships look like and what countries will be involved. So that's something definitely to watch if they are allowed back into the programme. And just to pick up on what Tony said, obviously, we're very pro the benefits of Erasmus Plus for our students, but in terms of a higher education perspective, Southampton, we maybe send 350 students each year. We receive at least 700 students from the EU, and of all of those students are receiving funding through Erasmus Plus, and several countries in the EU have already stated that with the loss of the Erasmus Plus funding, their students will no longer be able to come to the UK, which happens to be one of the most expensive study destinations for people to come to. So there is a counter argument. I know a lot of our partner institutions are lobbying their own kind of national committees and their own governments for the UK's continued involvement in the programme. So there's a lot of toing and froing and a lot of decisions to be made, but a lot of people are very pro it. So it's kind of watch this space.
And just a really short one. The current Erasmus Plus, the bit that I know about anyway, I don't think the entrepreneurs bit is like this, but the current round of 7-year program ends this year, and there will be a renewal of the next 7 years starting 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs is a different pot of money from the Erasmus Plus. It comes from the innovation funding that the EU enterprise and the innovation programs have. So my funding finishes in 2022 for the UK nationals. After that, yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it will be. It's usually for also 7 years, but it will be from 2022.
Yeah, our lead school has asked us desperately to be a part of our next project, 2020 to 2022, even though we're coming to the end of that 7 years. So they're putting us into the application. Whether we get kicked out or not, we leave it to be seen. But we are a destination that all the countries, Italy, Finland and Germany, desperately want to keep because they all their students learn English. So
yeah. Even for the entrepreneurs, the #1 destination in Europe for incoming entrepreneurs has been the UK. And it's a big loss. It's a big loss. Yeah. So all the Italians, Spanish are the senders, and the UK are the receivers, and that's a bit of a problem.
I've just seen Yvonne's question in the chat in terms of what are our plans to keep links going. I can talk from a university perspective. So in a very kind of blunt way, Erasmus Plus, if we do lose membership of it, it will not be the end of European exchange. We have already spoken to all of our European partners, and because UK remains a very popular destination, it might make it a very elitist destination, unfortunately, for European students, but they are committed to continuing to physically exchange students. All that will change is the funding mechanism behind that. So we currently exchange internationally all over the world with America, Australia, Canada. That is outside of the Erasmus Plus framework. So what we have started is contingency planning to make sure that those partnerships and those links are not lost to students if it continues to be a bit of a grey area and a bit of debate area, is we have moved all of our agreements with partners to what's known as bilateral exchange, which is what we currently have with international partners who are outside of the Erasmus Plus programme. Obviously, within that, you're no longer getting the funding, you're no longer getting the reporting and everything else that comes with Erasmus Plus, but it means that students physically and logistically will still be able to go to Europe. The question will just be, how do we financially fund them to do so? So that's what we're doing in universities, and I know that that's pretty standard across the sector in terms of most universities are now heading towards that kind of model.
I'll just jump in there because another part of my job, the bit I do at the British Council right now, is a school exchange programme, which was set up by the government last year as their post-Brexit strategy that Britain should be an international country and should have international relations. And I spent 2 years of my time off work lobbying for my local school to have more money. And then the jobs I got, when I went back, they found £2.5 million to fund this. So even if kids around here don't have pencils at school, somehow they found in the education, but sorry, I must keep my politics out of it, sorry. But anyway, they have money and they have drive, and high up people are agreeing, yes, Britain should be an international country and we will find money for these kind of things. So I know a school's exchange program is really, really small compared to all the other stuff that Erasmus Plus does, but it gives some hope that maybe there could be more similar things.
Thank you. And there was a question from Colin for Susie. Are there some MPs or other significant national players who are keen to see Erasmus Plus continue in the UK?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this. Gemma,
or anyone else who...
Yeah, you were talking about the Save Erasmus campaign or hashtag?
Yeah, so the two big kind of national agencies that are, I call them national agencies, I don't necessarily know if that's the right way to refer to them. The two big national bodies that are very, very pro Erasmus Plus are Universities UK from a higher education perspective, and obviously the British Council as the current national agency in terms of administrating the programme on behalf of the EU. I know Vivienne Stern has been outwardly supportive and very vocal about how much she supports the Erasmus Plus programme. There was another MP that debated it. I can't remember, he was from the south, but I can't remember what his name was, that brought it up in the Commons and led the debate around it. But I know in terms of higher education and education bodies, every single kind of head of an education body is very, very pro the Erasmus Plus programme. There are several Lords that sit in the House of Lords that have openly spoken about their support for the programme, and he may divide opinion and it doesn't matter what I think of him, but Boris Johnson has also been quoted in terms of it being supportive of the Erasmus Plus programme and also supportive of the importance of international student mobility for students. Potentially more the financial side of the importance of international students for the UK. Maybe that's the underlying concern, but from our perspective, if he is supportive of it as a mechanism to fighting for the Erasmus Plus programme, then that's a good thing on kind of, in my opinion. So Vivienne Stern has been very, very vocal. I know she's definitely a supporter, and you can have a look at the Universities UK support #Study Abroad campaign. There are a lot of people who have actively supported that on social media and within the news.
And that's all we have time for this month. Thanks to the panel and to all of you for taking part. We'll be back on the 15th of July 2020 with a talk on settled status from Settled, the new charity supporting EU nationals who want to remain in the UK. Good night.